So welcome back, Soccerholics fan, to part two. And I got a toque this time of Xtra Time with this little mini-series that I think is actually going to quite catch on because I think Adam loves it, Goals of Our Lives. And Adam, welcome back again for part two. As I can tell, you love that cardigan, you love those jerseys, and I hope you like my toque as well.
Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah, you got me going when I was thinking about those goals, when I was writing these down and thinking about those key clutch moments in my time of being an Arsenal supporter. And I'm sure these are moments that can resonate with a lot of people as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's share it. I know with the first episode we kind of touched on a few goals, but I know that you got a lot more. But what I guess I'm kind of looking for is like what is that moment that like draws out these goals? Like as I said before in the previous video, was like these are kind of like check marks in our lives. Like for my brother, for instance, he's a big fan. And when I recall back at thinking about the soccer, all I remember was a Batty goal. Gabriel Batistuta playing for Fiorentina. Like that's a big moment that sticks out for me. The jersey, the colors, the goals, the celebrations. Like, are there any players for you that like had that kind of moment, whether it was in an Arsenal kit or, in a national team kit or just about any team like that you can maybe share with us?
Yeah, well, kind of going chronologically, continuing on from the last video, which was like 06, 07, and 07, 08. One thing that I was always a fan of was the obscure goal scorer. And for like when a defender scored or something, from one memory of that era that reminds me, it was Nicholas Bentner who scored the winning goal, which would be the winning goal against Spurs. He came off the bench. It was like, I think it's still the fastest goal ever scored by a substitute. And
37 seconds, I think.
oh, Fabregas just crosses it in from the corner, boom, and Bentner scores. And he was so young. And there was another great, very much a player with high potential, and I was a big fan of his. He scored some great goals, but obviously we knew he had some disciplinary issues. But that was a goal that I remembered. And Almunia saved a penalty. I think it was just before or soon after, and I just remember just the rush in the North London derby, and I started understanding more of how much that game meant to Arsenal supporters. And oh man, it was just brilliant. Another player that really stood out for me during that time was Eduardo, and he had signed.
Yes,
Yeah,
Eduardo.
he struggled to get in, but he started slowly coming into the side. And one game that really stood out for me was where we beat Everton 4-1. And this was at Goodison Park, and this was on the 29th of December of that year. And I remember Eduardo scored. He scored a brace in that game. And I remember my dad was leaving to work or something, and I just ran out, and it was snowing, and it was cold, and I just went to his window, and I was like, yes. I just the jubilation
I
of
hope you had a jacket on for that one. Man, that sounds pretty cool for me.
don't think I did, but it was just so brilliant, just exhilarating.
And
Sorry. Yeah.
no, I just want to know like what made that brace, because Eduardo is one of my favorite strikers from his time with Arsenal, and it's unfortunate, of course, that that season, if I do recall it correctly, whether it was that season or the season after, I think he
Was.
had the crucial injury that kind of derailed their what looked like to be hopeful opportunities to reclaim the title. But he was a fantastic striker, just for his ability to be clinical and just, I guess, his way to just score in the box, like a fox in the box, as Thierry Henry coined the term. Like you need.
Yeah, it was his positioning. I remember that was brilliant, but it was just finally the player was getting his moment to shine, and if he's wearing our colors, then he's gonna have my support 100%. And
Mm-hmm.
again, because he wasn't really finding the back of the net just yet, and that was the game where you would hope he would start kicking on, and he did, because he. In February, we played Man City away, and he scored again, and Adebayor scored. And it was great because at that time, Adebayor was the king of the goals. Van Persie was still coming into his own, but we all had that third option in Eduardo.
That's actually incredible now that I think about looking back at that strike force. Was like, Thierry Henry, if I recall, I think if you remember, I mentioned in the last video, was Henry scoring that goal at United. And I remember from that celebration, it was Henry and Adebayor. They kind of went off on the sidelines of the Emirates, and they kind of did a little dance celebration. So it's kind of, I like that progression into the following season where Adebayor kind of took the reins of like, this is my team. I'm going to lead the line right now. And I understand that for some Arsenal fans, he's maybe not in their heart. Same thing with Robin van Persie. But the one thing that I've always liked about a good goal scorer, in this opinion, my personal view, is just like their ability to just take the reins and see like, I'm going to be the main man for the team. Like, when you're looking in your biggest game, or sometimes even on those off days, is like, I'm going to just take the reins. I'm going to score the goal, whether it's a diving header back post or just a cheeky tap in after a nice buildup of 15 passes. Like, I just remember Adebayor, he just had such a range of goals. And like, I found that like he was Drogba for me before Drogba got the praise that he did, in my eyes at least. And I know I'm coming into soccer reversed. I think Drogba was with Chelsea, I think, much earlier before Adebayor really emerged. But for me, the type of striker that Drogba is appreciated for nowadays, like I saw that in Adebayor first before I obviously was like looking at other teams and being like, oh, they have a striker that kind of can do the same thing that Adebayor can do. So
Yeah. Well, we had that kind of flexibility. We had two left-footed strikers and
mhm.
Adebayor as a right-footed striker, and it was nice that we were able to do that. And that felt like we had that was a season that I think we should have won the league, because soon after that game, it kind of all fell apart. We had a series of draws. I think it was 5 draws in a row, and the first one was that 2-2 draw against Birmingham, and that was
Oh,
the game where Eduardo had his leg snapped
that
by.
that that was infuriating because, as I said before, you look at the pedigree of the strikers that you had in that type of team. You had Adebayor, which was, I guess you could probably call him a complete forward for the most part, or a good target man. Eduardo was your fox in the box that you wanted, and Van Persie was just like, he was coming into his own of being a technician with a killer shot.
Mm.
That's what you wanted for those types of games, because like you want to almost look at your strike force to have different strengths. So that way, like when you have these matches and when you look at that kind of run, you almost kind of wish that you had Eduardo back, because maybe Eduardo would have been the solution in some of those games.
Well, that's the thing when you need a plan B, and that's something that we struggled to have. And then we didn't even know, I think, at that time that Arsen's approach to games was just go and play, right? Like there was an element to that, but we didn't know to what extent, and it seemed like these players needed a little more guidance, right? Whereas in the early 2000s, he was able to assemble a team based off of individual skill that was able to gel together, and that struggled to work 10 years later. And that time was when the confidence really showed that we were very frail mentally, especially in that game against Birmingham, where Walcott is actually another player that I was a big fan of at that time, because he was my age, a year older than me, and
Mm-hmm.
he was getting there, and he was so fast, and he was like the player that represented me to some extent, because he was the kid that was in my age group that
Yeah.
was getting goals and getting a chance and had potential, and yeah, it was that game was really sad with the leg break, and the manner in which it happened. And then Walcott actually scored a brace to get us back in the game. And even though we were all, I just that game was so hard to watch, but we were there and still winning that game. And then Clichy conceded a penalty in the 90th minute, and then Gallas had his whole moment. And that's when it all fell apart. You would hope at the time I was hoping that that wasn't going to be the case, but then it all just really came crumbling down. We had 4 goalless draws after that, and essentially our title challenge wasn't fully over, but it was essentially done with that.
Yeah.
We were like good, but not good enough. We weren't able to beat the likes of United at that time, and we struggled against Chelsea too. That we were title contenders as well, but we were just like not. We were just a little bit not good enough. We needed 1 addition, 2 additions, a defender,
I
central
just think we
defensive.
needed a different kind of balance because, like, you look at that, you mentioned that we had like 4 sets of 0-0 draws, and like those are perfect matches in my head, hypothetically, because, the other team defended perfectly. We defended perfectly. We missed chances when we should have because of their defending, and the same went back for them. But, you look the other way, and that's where, like I mentioned, a player like Eduardo, for instance, of just being that type of fox in the box, or that player that can just do that moment of brilliance that just kind of breaks
Mhm.
tactics or reality of like the situation. and can just give you that moment of excitement, that rush, that's when I
Yeah.
think it's good. Like,
I think there was in that same season later on, the game that kind of was the hammer blow was losing to United 2-1. Adebayor scored right after the break, and
mhm.
then I think Ronaldo had a penalty, and then Owen Hargreaves scored a free kick, and it was like, oh, great. Um, and it was like, again, I think yes, it was great to have that type of strike force, and we were heavy up top, but we were lacking at the back a little bit, and I think that's where we struggled. We struggled to have a plan B. I think that's where we struggled, and it got a little more worse as time went on.
Mhm.
So another game that I just want to bring up from that, 2 goals actually. One was
Okay.
Flamini versus Newcastle. He scored. We won 3-0, and I remember I was at a friend's place, and that game was going on, and I was watching the little game cast. Or at any time there was a game and I wasn't able to watch it, or I was outside or something, I was always trying to get on a computer and then trying to get a game cast.
Were you trying to like watch the full game, or were you trying to watch like the highlights of the game? Because like I
I
know
could
with like how today is, a lot of people are now like, I just really want to watch like the 12-minute long extended highlights. I don't have time to sit down and watch a full 90-minute game.
Yeah, so I'm actually the kind of person who I can't PVR a game and not be told what the score is. Like when the game's happening, I have to be in the know right away
Mhm.
uh, as it's happening. I just can't do that. Even when it was in those days of game casts and I'm watching on a little field and dots are popping up, I just could not. I couldn't handle the idea that a game has happened and I'm like waiting 5 or 6 more hours before I can sit down and watch it. I enjoyed watching the extended highlights or whatever I could get my hands on. But when it was happening live, I had to know what was happening.
So you don't like being surprised about the goals and everything. So
I need to
hate
know.
it.
No, I don't hate it. It's just that's just how I operate. I can't
Fair
wait.
enough.
You know. And then so finally in that season, a goal that stood out to me was Walcott. There were a few goals in this game. It was like total football, beautiful football. The one that we celebrated so much was when we beat Slavia Prague 7-0 at the Emirates Stadium in the Champions League group stage. And we were just so good to watch that day. And Walcott scored a goal and he celebrated. I remember he had his fingers pointed to the sky and he was celebrating the passing of his brother-in-law's brother, I believe. So it was very touching for him. And again, like I had that kind of connection to Walcott
Mhm.
at that time because I felt it. And yeah, that was also the same season we lost to Liverpool in the Champions League quarterfinal. But I didn't watch that game. I found out about it. I was at school because it was on Tuesday, or it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and I couldn't watch it. And it was that was heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. And then like finding out that Ryan Babel had a little dive in the box after Walcott set up Adebayor for that brilliant goal. And that was just so it's such a bitter pill because we were good, but
Mhm.
we were lacking. Actually, final one from that season.
Yeah, I don't
Fab-
blame you. I know it's tough because you're basically going through re-suffering of all these moments. So it's okay.
oh,
I also am suffering, but I'm just intrigued to see what goals like catch your eye.
Fabregas versus AC Milan. Oh man, that game. I remember rushing
Another
home
great
from
away
school.
day by Arsenal.
Oh, that we were the first English side to beat Milan at the San Siro. And I remember rushing home from school to watch the game, and I caught the second half. And Fabregas scored that crazy goal, and he ran to Wenger, and everyone was just all together, and that was really special. That was a really special moment for us. And then Adebayor finished it off, and
White
we were so
kits, if I
good.
recall correctly.
White kits, and again, Milan had such a brilliant side. They had Pirlo, they had Maldini, they had Nesta. Um, they just were so good. They had Seedorf. He was another one, like a very. I love Clarence Seedorf,
Mhm.
and they were just a really, really strong team. And we were the young guns who were able to go and get something out of it. So that was really special. That was a really special game.
And I definitely will say that Fabregas for me there, he looks like almost like the poster child of this next generation that, if I recall correctly, Wenger was trying to transition the team into. And even though I know, unfortunately, we didn't see that young generation hit the heights that we were expecting, or a lot of them didn't get to stay together, that for me as well is definitely a really good moment that still sits with me and resonates a lot with me because it showed the potential of what these players, if they actually did stay together for 2-3 years, could do against an established side of one of Europe's elites in one of the most fearsome grounds in Europe.
Well, also getting maybe a more experienced head in the team could have been
Mm-hmm.
something that made the world of a difference. And we were also asking for that as fans. I remember I wrote a blog post on oleole.com, if you remember that website. And I wrote a blog post about why we need to sign Gareth Barry. This was after Flamini went to Milan on a free, and we didn't have a defensive midfielder. I believe Alex Song graduated, but Wenger wanted to rely on that youth. And we were
Yeah.
this close to signing Xabi Alonso.
Yeah. I know
That would have been the deal
soccer's
breaker.
what ifs.
That would have been the deal breaker. And then Fabregas was on the Ars blog podcast recently, the
Mm-hmm.
Arscast. And that was such a brilliant episode because just to listen to such a candid conversation and then finding out how close we were to getting Xabi Alonso and realizing and hearing it at that moment that it was true is, again, like what ifs, but especially that. If Xabi Alonso played alongside Fabregas in our midfield,
What
I
could
think
have been? You
what
know
could have
what?
been, I don't know.
I know how good that midfield is. You want to know why? Because I probably played it in FIFA, as did many kids and Football
Oh,
Manager in the
yeah.
video games.
Oh,
That's where people get fulfilled.
so on that note, a player that we did bring in that summer
Yeah.
that ended up being there were two players, but one of them stood out for me because I did sign him on FIFA, was Samir Nasri.
Ah,
And
yes.
I
Good
remember
man. From
seeing him.
Marseille.
Oh man, he was so good. He was the right fit for us. And again, it's so hard to make judgments off of a video game. But at that time, I remember I just loved building squads and seeing what players would come in. And Samir Nasri was one of those players, so I was really happy about him. And of course, after his FA Cup heroics, unfortunately on the losing side, but Aaron Ramsey was really gathering speed and he ended up coming to us, and I was so thrilled about that. That was really cool that we signed Aaron Ramsey that summer, and he ended up being with us for so long. 10 years.
I know,
Whoa.
it's incredible. He is honestly, I'll probably say in the first 5 years, he wasn't probably my favorite player. There were other players that probably stole the headlines, but for what he was capable, for what he was doing in the midfield, and now looking back at it in hindsight 2020, I'm really glad that I fell in love with how he played the game. And even though he isn't a Cazorla, Fabregas, like I know a lot of the Arsenal fans are more attracted to with the aesthetics of playing the beautiful game, I think for where I saw football was going at that time, I'm very glad that he worked out just as much. I know if a player such as Wilshere, Oxlade-Chamberlain ended up working out in Arsenal colors and creating as many moments as Aaron Ramsey did, they probably would be better legends. But those are what ifs. And I get to unfortunately be the one to say I win in the end from that lovely debate that I know Arsenal fans love to have about who was going
Yeah.
to be better and who was going to be a bigger club legend and who was going to have the bigger impact on the world stage. But football is a magical game. We all take our gambles, and sometimes we win, sometimes we lose.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Oh man. Are you want to delve into the next season? No, we can save
Hey,
that for the next one, but that was also the summer where we signed Mikel Silvestre. We needed a defender, but that
yeah,
was also really annoying because Adebayor left to Man City and Kolo Toure went to Man City. And I think I don't know if I don't remember if Clichy left that time as well,
I
but I
think
remember,
Clichy left. I think, if I recall correctly, I think it was the period after that. So it would have
yeah,
either been within like the next season transfer window.
yeah.
I don't think City did like a wholesale like, hey, let's weaken our closest rivals in this stage.
Well, they
It
got
was
they
it was a
had a very
progress.
defended the very experienced defender in Kolo Toure. He probably really did a big number on coaching Vincent Company,
Yeah, I
and
never
then
thought about it like that actually. Now you put it like
yeah,
that.
and then there was Adebayor, who I'll never forget that summer. You were saying that playing for Milan would be like dating Beyonce, and then he ended up going to City, and that was ugly. But we signed Mikel Silvestre. Remember that? I'll never forget that. I was working at a bookstore. I was working at Chapters, one of my favorite places on the planet. And I remember coming home because obviously I didn't have the internet on my phone at that time.
Hmm.
And I remember going on the Arsenal website, and it was defender, new signing, Silvestre.
What the hell? I know that's what. Hey, you
Wow.
know what? I don't know if he's going to be fondly remembered, but I think he was. It checked out. He was an experienced defender. I know it's kind of against Arsene Wenger's policy at the time that, like, you're signing guys closer to the age of 30 and everything else, and we were asking for people to, be like the old guard, like how we had looked at what used to be our rivals at that time, like United, and I think that's when we were slowly declining, where we were like a player or two behind them and being able to keep up. But I think it was a reasonable signing for the time it was. Like, you get an experienced defender. Hopefully you can teach the younger defenders that are hopefully hitting their prime. I see nothing wrong with it. It's just the name, maybe what club he came from. His resume checks out, though.
Yeah, I mean, he was, yeah, sure, he was on a great United side for many years, but just the type of defender we needed at the time was not a guy who was on the bench for United. And I mean, yeah, you would think that that would be good enough, but at the same time, yes, on paper it seemed like it was a good signing, but in actuality and in practice, it was not. And I just remember he just made some really bad gaffes, and like I'll never forget even that season. Like we drew Spurs 4-4. That was a game I started smoking cigarettes again because I don't smoke now anymore, but like at that time, man, that game infuriated me. And that was also the season I think where we lost 3-2 against Wigan, like late on in the season, and Sylvester just had a mare, as they
Mhm.
say. Yeah. Not fun. That was not the type of defender we needed at the time. But anyways, we can't change that. It's part of the past and part of the journey.
So, Adam, if there was one goal to summarize that season, what would it be?
Well, in January, I remember we needed a bit of spark because we were lacking it. And we're talking about 2009. That's when Van Persie got injured against Italy in a friendly. It was Van Persie versus Chiellini, and
Hmm.
Chiellini just it was ugly. And that's when Van Persie was coming into his own. We'd have like glimpses of Van Persie, then get injured. Then he was just a good striker that could never have one full season. And that was another season where if he was playing the whole season, yeah, who knows? But
The potential
if
was there.
if there's a goal that I can summarize that whole season for me, I think it has to be, it's going to be weird. It has to be Yossi Benayoun against us in that 4-4 draw against Liverpool. Our shadow, like that was one of the craziest games I'd ever witnessed, and we had such a wicked. We were winning 4-3, and that was a game that would have been one of the great wins. Like, I mean, yeah, it would. It
What
was one
what
of those
what could have
games.
been?
What could have been one of the great Arsenal wins at Anfield, and we've had a few over. Well, not recently, but at that time we were getting a few great results there, and
Because
and
if I
then our
recall correctly from
man.
recent highlights of the showstopper, I think Arshavin got 4, and then I think it was Torres with 2, and then Ben Ayoun got 2 as well. And the way how I remembered that game, for some reason, looking back, before I watched it over, was that I thought Arshavin had scored to make it 4-4, not that we had gone to the lead. And when
Yeah,
I
we
had watched it over again, and now that you mentioned Ben Ayoun's goal, that's what was depressing. It was that give or take kind of feeling. Like every time that we conceded, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's same old Arsenal as it's been coined. I don't know why someone hasn't copyrighted that, but there you go. But then every
were.
time we scored, it's like, this is the Arsenal that we know. This is the Arsenal that we've been telling people about. And just seeing that performance, like I think we already mentioned one player previously, Julio Bastita, the one that came from Real Madrid. If I call on loan, he's the only other guy that I can recall that scored 4 goals in a match, besides Thierry Henry, of course, and a couple others. But at least in my recent memory, Arshavin's performance stands out. Like I remember just he didn't believe it. I remember him holding up the 3 finger. He's just like, and he's like,
Like this. Yeah, no, it was crazy because he made it 4-4. He just ripped it into the back of the net. I remember just being in complete disbelief. I was in as much disbelief as he was.
Yeah.
Because he
Left foot, right foot. It doesn't even matter. He beats the keeper, if I recall the commentary.
the fourth goal was so brilliant because of how he just ripped it. He just ripped it and he just hit the ball so hard that it swerved. It had a little outside swerve, and then it just nestled in the
And
corner.
it beat Reina. And I remember the build-up, I think, if I recall correctly, because I did actually watch this goal actually recently in preparation. I just wasn't expecting to bring it up, but I know we were talking about Ben Ayoun, but the break was like, if I recall, I think we had the ball out. Wolcott puts on the Jets. And the way how the camera angle one pans out, it's Wolcott versus, if I recall, I think one or two Liverpool defenders. Then all of a sudden, in the bottom left corner of your screen, you just see Arshavin just booking it. Like, I'm not sure if he had another one of those sprints in him, but he just had it in him, and he kept up. And Wolcott, thankfully he hit the ball correctly for once, because I know that was one of our issues. He's so quick, but can he technically, execute the right pass so that way the play doesn't break down? And he hit it perfectly, and then, you stole the words out of my mouth. He was decisive, but then Arsenal just collapsed in the box, if I recall correctly.
Like right at the end.
But it's Anfield, man. We know how it goes. It's Anfield. When you play at Anfield, anything can happen. Atletico Madrid could even win a game. So
yeah, we've had a few of those kind of weird draws where we were in the lead. It happened in 2015-16. We were winning 3-2, and then they equalized late. And then again, like this season, we had that absolutely insane game in the Carabao Cup with the 5-5 draw. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Joe Willock, man. That's like another goal that I'll never forget.
And hey, don't worry. I know you'll have time to go more through that Joe Willock game too as well. Same with me. If I recall, last time I think Carabao Cup, I think it was that 7-5. I really can't wait to actually discuss that one with you.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But yeah, but from the 08-09 season, definitely Arshavin. Because we needed something. He was linked with a lot of clubs and no one ended up signing him. And then we somehow pulled the rabbit out of the hat late on in January. And I think he was our record signing at the time. And he scored his first goal against Blackburn. And it was just like magic. He was just a little magician.
A little acute angle, if I recall, from that goal. And, that for me, like, I know we did say, like, we would discuss, but, like, Arshavin, he scored a different array of goals. And he was one of those guys that kind of reminds me of, like, whenever you're going snowboarding. Like, he started on the top of the hill. He was amazing. And unfortunately, his career kind of dabbled off as he was going downhill. But I was glad that, during those first 18 months of Arshavin, anytime he touched the ball and he just made that little happy hour space, I really did believe that there was anything could happen. And that's the magic of a great goal scorer, is having that it factor that, like, when they touch the ball, you kind of get up off your seat and you're like, oh, this is going to be the moment. So
he had a few of those. Yeah.
And there's been a lot of Arsenal, and I do plan to go through a lot more of them with you. But unfortunately, time does have to stop. This is in the Twitch stream. So unfortunately, to the viewers that are enjoying this video, like, banner, subscribe, and do all that good stuff like in between. This is Goals of Your Lives. This is Adam Esker. I'm Chris. And to anybody else that wants to join, post some comments below of your favorite goals or give us a shout out at our contact information, guys. And I'm signing off here from Xtra Time and Soccerholics TV. And thanks again, guys.
Cheers.